If you're listening to this, then I'm dead, etc, etc. It's free. I know a lot of people won't think this game is worth a chance, but hear me out because I think it is. And more importantly, it's free. Free to play, free trading cards, free for you right now. Most people click off the video in the first 30 seconds, so I wanted to put this up front. If you like trading card games, then I promise you will be interested. And it's free, you can play for free, free trading cards for you right now. There are some provisos to that statement, but those provisos also have provisos, and I'm not even going to do the YouTube thing of making you wait to the back end of the video before I explain the thing I said up front. This video's actual intro will have to wait a moment, as the reason the cards are free is because you can play digitally, either online against your friends or strangers, or offline against bots. There is a single player mode and a training room to learn the mechanics. Additionally, because it's only digital, you don't pay, which is fantastic, and is part of why I'm recommending this game. But you only ever own the digital cards in the same way you only ever own anything digital, which is only ever technically own and not really own at all if the servers are ever shut down. But as this site exists right now, it is all of the cards from the start, no grinding required to unlock, meaning you can start brewing immediately and deck building using any cards that you like. Also, the game is in browser, meaning no client and no download required. You could literally boot it up right now on your phone by just going to the URL or clicking the link in the description, and you'd be playing a game in minutes. However, importantly, this version of the game is not official. This is a community-run website with all of the risks that entails. You do not need to log in or give the website any personal information if you don't want to, outside of the data that they could gather by you just visiting, like any website. Though if you play without logging in, you're limited to only using the pre-constructed decks, because the site needs you to create an account to remember any decks that you build. That being said, creating an account only required being sent an email, so your mileage may vary on how comfortable you are with that. For me, I'm comfortable enough to have done it myself and comfortable enough to mention the website to you right now, but not so comfortable as to blindly endorse it. Do not take these words as a recommendation that you should use this website. I'm just telling you that I am, and I'm making you aware of the good and the bad of the site, so that you can make your own choice. For instance, something else to bear in mind is that the site is a bit buggy. I've been timed out of games for no reason, some of the links don't work, like the one that lets you print off a proxy version of your deck, and there are a few bugged cards that don't quite work as intended. But hey, the website is new, I've already seen them make several updates and bug fixes, and these are the sorts of problems that can be fixed in time. Plus, I didn't pay any money here, and the actual important stuff like the majority of gameplay is solid, so I can't complain. However, again, because the site isn't official, I'm gonna guess it could get DMCA'd any day. The site owners seem confident that they're not breaking any rules and that won't happen, but I think if an official digital version of this game ever comes out, then that situation might change and this site might be taken down. However, yet again, if that happened, I think it would be a real shame, because the free, easy access, community supported nature of this website's existence is very pro-consumer and is a big part of why ultimately I'm going to be recommending this game. Am I being sponsored in any way? Did they send me anything? Am I a shill? No, I'm just a dude that's passionate about card games and wanted to get the word out on this one. And with that out of the way, we're at the intro of this video. Because you may be asking, hey, what the hell are you talking about? And to that I would say, Palworld. You know, that Pokemon with guns video game? And I know many people will roll their eyes at that, but that's actually something I want to address. And, like I say, if you like good card games, then stick with me here, because did you know that Palworld launched an official TCG? Because I didn't until I was browsing an online store and saw it for sale. I was intrigued enough to take a closer look, then impressed enough by the prices to buy 2 starter decks and a booster box, and finally happy enough with the gameplay that I wanted to push my monthly quiz back a week to make this review. So here are the bullet points of what I'm going to talk about. First, what the game even is. Second, I won't cover all the rules, but I do want to highlight what makes the gameplay unique, and why I think you might like it. Third, prices and what you get for paying them. Fourth, my overall impressions as a new player. Fifth, my hope for the future. Sixth, challenges I think the game may face currently and going forward, including the Nintendo elephant in the room. And finally, we'll end on spoilers, my recommendation that you give this game a chance because I think it's quite good actually, and the more I play it, the more my estimation of it goes up. Seriously, check it out, it's surprisingly great and the card quality is really good too, but more on that in the review section. And while discussing all these points on screen, I'll display all the images that were taken by my assistant, Dr. Hands. And if we run out of those, I'll scroll through a bunch of pictures of my favourite cards from the game. Normally when doing a review like this, I try to match up what I'm saying with what's happening on screen, but for this one, honestly, these pictures were taken before either Dr. Hands or I had any idea how to play. He got the product, and before sending it on to me to playtest, I told him to open it all, and because we didn't know how to play yet, just take pictures of whatever cards he thought looked the most interesting. So there will be a spotlight card for each pack, but they're just the ones that Dr. Hands thought looked the most cool or whatever. Right then, what is this Palworld? It's a trading card game based on the video game of the same name. The video game is often referred to as Pokemon with Guns, which isn't inaccurate, but is a bit reductive. Palworld, the video game, is actually much more about base building, and that is something that the TCG has tried to replicate. In fact, the booster box packaging even reads, "The Palworld official card game is a 2-player card game where you lead a team of unique pals and aim for victory." Alongside pals, other elements of the game, such as gears, events and structures, will all be brought to life as cards. Combine a variety of cards and recreate the Palworld experience in this trading card game that offers depth of strategy and freedom. And I think that makes it clear that this is meant to be a TCG representation of the video game. And in that regard, I think it more or less succeeds. There is a focus on base building, and the over-the-top, cartoonish, ridiculous anime nature of some of the things that happen in the video game are captured quite nicely, not just by the card designs, but also by the gameplay too. All of the PAL creature types are condensed down into 4 colours for the TCG, red, blue, green and purple, and a deck can be made up of any 2 colours. There are currently 2 what they call trial decks available at launch, a red-blue one focused on tapping your opponents down and dealing massive damage, and a green-purple one focused on gaining a bunch of resources and destroying your opponent's pals outright. Each deck contains 60 cards, 50 playable ones and 10 soul cards, which act as this game's mana system. Dr. Hands told me 10 of the playable cards were out of order with the rest of them, and a few had foiling, which made us question whether perhaps there's a chance to get alt art versions of these cards in the actual decks, but we couldn't confirm that, so can't say for sure. Each deck's packaging says some of the cards included may be replaced with parallel versions, but doesn't explain what that means. Did these 10 cards have a chance of being alt arts? Or was this just a strange quirk of the printing process? No idea. Anyway, inside you also get a couple of tokens and counters to mark your life and resources, a paper playmat, a quick start rule sheet, and a randomized booster pack, which is great. That's why you're going to see 14 boosters opened in this video, 12 from the booster box and 1 each from one of the decks. I love when TCGs include a booster in with their precons, makes them feel like they're value for money, big thumbs up. The 2 decks felt pretty balanced against each other, but more importantly, didn't feel like baby beginner nothing decks that would need to be upgraded to be fun. There's some bombs included here, and you can have a good time with just these 2 decks alone. Meaning for the price, I was left feeling like these decks were both a lot of fun to play, and really good value for money. More on prices in a bit, but if all you bought was a deck or 2, then I think you'd be satisfied. There's around 240 cards to collect from what I can tell currently. Some, as mentioned, have special foiling and alt arts, and overall I found the print quality and card stock to be really high. This felt like a quality product. The alt arts and foiling treatment are impressive too. The cards feel textured and that rainbow shine is gorgeous. So if you're only a collector, there is something here for you. The cards are nice. Now let's talk about what makes this game unique and ask the big question. Why play this over anything else? Well, obviously the first selling point if you're a fan is that it's Palworld branded, but I also think that's as much of a hindrance to non-fans, so for now let's just discuss the unique gameplay elements. And for context, I will refer to similar elements from other games like Magic, but I actually had to unlearn a bunch of stuff to understand what Palworld was doing, so I think it's best to leave your assumptions at the door when it comes to this game. First of all, tactically, it's fantastic, and distinct in a good way. It's more interactive than the Pokemon TCG, which can feel very much your turn, my turn, with, at times, you just sort of sitting there waiting for your opponent to let you play. But Palworld is also more dramatic than something like Magic the Gathering. There's massive swings in power each turn, with players often starting turns having to build up from nothing to try and board wipe their opponent before next turn being board wiped themselves. But the gameplay accounts for that, and Well, I referred to the game feeling like an anime earlier, and I think that's spot on. Palworld is very engaging in that way, as even when it's not your turn, your opponent is doing some overpowered broken nonsense that's just thrilling to watch, which is similar to how Pokemon can feel to play. But Palworld is also interactive. There's interrupts which you can play on your opponent's turn to negate damage, and the freedom for you to block attacks, allowing for much more dynamic and tactical gameplay. So while your opponent is doing some crazy busted stuff, you're waiting for the exact right moment to throw a spanner into their works, ruining their plan before your turn begins and you can do some busted nonsense yourself. It's great. When I played, we had a turn where I wanted to use my big Grizzbolt to attack one of my opponent's pals, only to have that attack blocked by one of my opponent's other pals, dealing some damage to his blocker but killing my Grizzbolt. So then I attempted to attack the one that he just used to block, as it had now suffered a bunch of damage with one of my other pals, only for my opponent to block this new attack using the first pal I'd attempted to target with my first attack. I mean, I got board wiped there and he lost nothing, but it was thrilling because it was such a genius play. This defense crisscross of making me change targets on the fly, it just made both of us erupt into laughter. This game isn't hard, but there's certainly potential for high-level complex interaction. It's great, fantastic even. Also, in trying to replicate the video game, the TCG has included what they call structure cards, which are permanently played to the board and can be attacked, but don't deal damage back. The structure cards have a variety of effects, but many of them are treated like work sites that you can assign your pals to. Send your pal to work at the stone pit, for instance, and it will gather resources for you. And then these resources can be used to power up other structures, or sometimes even pals themselves, meaning there's an entire sub-play system going on here where you're not just trying to attack and block, but also build and maintain a base. Literally building a combo engine. And finally, the last unique aspect I want to mention is that each deck can include up to 8 lucky pals, signified by a symbol in the top corner. These lucky pals are a little bit more powerful than regular pals, hence the deck construction restriction, but also feed into another unique system within the game. See, pals all do 2 types of damage, one against other pals and structures, and then a single digit number that they do against players, meaning some pals are better at fighting each other whereas some are better at hurting players. And this matters because whenever you take player damage, before you lose life, you need to mill a number of cards equal to the damage that you just took. And if at any point you mill a lucky card, the attack immediately ends and you lose no life. So if you hit your opponent for 5 damage, they may lose 5 life, but first they need to mill 5 cards, and if any of those cards are lucky, they instead lose no life. This creates a really interesting dynamic of almost disincentivizing you to swing in with nothing but big creatures, because more damage in a single attack means more chances for your opponent to mill a lucky card, thus negating all of the damage. Technically, it's better to swing many single damage pals in, because they'd each only mill a single card, and if one of those is lucky, the rest of the damage would go through, but also you're only allowed 5 pals out at a time, and if you attack with all of them, you've got no one left to block or work your structures. So it's a really fascinating balancing act, and also means you can never be sure which attacks are going to be lethal because someone could always get lucky on the mill. I have lost games because I went all out on an attack, only for my opponent to get lucky 3 times in a row, leaving me completely defenseless for the following turn. So flavor aside, I think the gameplay is just doing some really interesting stuff, but also really dramatic and just plain funny stuff. Palworld knows what it is, and it doesn't shy away from that. It's never not funny after I've done some crazy Shadow Blast attack for my opponent to respond by just shooting me with a gun. At one point, one of my friends strapped a bazooka to a single penguin and sent him on a kamikaze mission, sacrificing the penguin but managing to clear my entire board in a single hit. I sat there watching him giggle to himself the entire time he was setting this combo up. It's great fun. Next, let's talk prices and accessibility, because that's the main reason that I decided to give this game a go. Now, stop for a moment because you once again need to leave your assumptions at the door. From what I can tell, the Palworld TCG is not following the standard TCG booster pack business model. And I initially wasn't a fan, but then I sort of stopped and thought about it. And actually, I think this may be a better way, because the boosters are not the game. The decks are the game, to the point where if all you bought was booster boxes, you would not be able to play. To play, you need one of these so-called trial decks, as they exclusively include a bunch of necessary game pieces that are not available in the boosters, including the 10-card Soul deck, the big high-cost, high-power bomb pals for each colour, and the majority of the colourless pals that have the flexibility to go into any deck. From what I can see, there's only a single colourless pal available in the boosters. But for this, those trial decks are very affordable. If there's an official MSRP for the decks, then I couldn't find it, but most UK retailers had them for £15 each, which for a 60-card playable out-of-the-box deck that contains everything one person needs, I actually think is really reasonable. And as I said, the two decks from this initial release are very well balanced against each other too. However, if you want to move beyond pre-con levels and start to customize your deck, maybe get a playset of those exclusive bombs I mentioned, well, because they're exclusive to those decks, that means you're going to have to buy multiple copies of said deck to get them, as they're not in the boosters, which isn't ideal, but is only really a factor if you want to raise the power level of your deck, something you don't need to do to have fun here. I'll explain my rationale more in a moment, but first let's talk boosters. When I saw that a full booster box was in the ballpark of £40, I was very impressed, especially considering other card games like Magic sell their booster boxes for well over £100. Pre-orders for a Play booster box of that MTG Hobbit set are currently up for £149.95 for instance. But those Magic boxes come with 30 packs. Palworld booster boxes only come with 12. Also, single Palworld boosters were selling for only £3.80, which sounds good compared to the £5.50 of those Hobbit packs, but those Hobbit packs contain 14 cards, whereas the Palworld boosters only contain 7. So if we break all that down to price per card, that works out to be about 54p per card in a Palworld booster compared to Magic's 39p per card in their boosters, and 50p per card in a Palworld booster box compared to Magic's 38p per card from their boxes. That makes Palworld significantly more expensive for non-pre-constructed deck booster cards, and that's before we even talk about availability. Because Palworld is sold out. I get the feeling that's mostly from chuds buying up everything hoping to resell the packs for profit. The Pokemon TCG famously struggles with scalping, and from what I'm seeing, I get the feeling a portion of those wasters have moved into this game too, hoping it's the next big way to make a quick buck. If you're watching this and you've ever become violent with someone in order to be the first to purchase a children's card game, I think you're a loser and you might want to reevaluate your life choices. Don't punch people in a Walmart, come on now. Now, a game does need collectors, and chase cards and a secondary market to be successful, but if that element of the TCG is so large that it strangles out the game portion, well then the history of TCGs tells us that the game won't be long for this world. If normal people can't get their hands on game pieces for an affordable price, they won't play. And if people don't play, there won't be anyone to sell the products to, other than scalpers, who will also eventually stop buying as they will be unable to resell the products for profit. And eventually, without players or scalpers, the makers of the game run out of people to sell to, and understandably they stop making it. Pokemon is kind of an exception to this. Sure, there are people that play that game, I was one of them competitively for many years, but I'm pretty certain even if all the players of Pokemon dried up, there's enough people out there that just love the franchise so much, willing to buy packs just to collect their favourite cards, that the TCG could survive on their sales alone. Despite what everyone says, Palworld is not Pokemon though, and this game is going to need players to survive. The few online stores I've seen with Palworld TCG stock remaining has put markups on what I already felt was quite an expensive price for boosters. At one point I saw that £42.50 booster box going for 130 quid. That's over £1.50 per card. Do not do it. Do not pay that. It's not worth it. Normally this is where I'd say, if the products are too expensive then just buy singles. But as the game is so new, I haven't actually seen anywhere other than eBay selling them, so this is all an issue. Hopefully it gets fixed in time though, because even with everything I just said, I actually don't hate what's going on here. I'm not necessarily in favour of it either, but I don't hate it. To be clear, I do hate markups and scalping, and I hope Pocket Pair, the company behind Palworld, print more product to keep the prices more in line with what I initially saw. I think that's the solution. Print the decks into oblivion, not necessarily the boosters, but the decks. Because currently, my perspective is such that it's less that the boosters are a lot more expensive than the decks, and instead that the decks are much cheaper than the packs. Palworld, I think, is not a cheap game with expensive boosters, but instead an expensive game that subsidizes the decks so that non-collectors, kids basically, can afford to actually play the game, and everyone who wants something more than that is going to pay a premium. And I kind of appreciate that business model. Would I rather that the boosters were cheaper? Yes, of course. At least more in line with the price of other games like Magic, which, in fairness, I also feel is too expensive. But I cannot hate on the fact that a Palworld deck is only £15, fun and functional. You will not see a full fun and functional Magic precon for that price. So I think in this regard, Palworld is knocking it out of the park. Those prices are gonna get people into playing the game. And yes, because those decks have exclusive cards, scalpers will grab them up. So I think the solution is to overprint them. Make sure everyone who wants one can get one at the cheaper price. That will make them less attractive to scalpers and mean more people have a chance to buy one. But a healthy secondary market is important to a game's success, and so the boosters are where a premium can be charged for anyone who may want to upgrade a deck and is more invested than a kid with a precon. That way we wouldn't be leaving the secondary market, and I guess the scalpers too, out to dry, as they do have a place in a healthy ecosystem for a TCG. I think if this is the intention of Pocket Pair with this game moving forward, it could work, as long as they officially support a pre-con format, so that the kids with the £15 decks won't be able to deck build admittedly, but will at least be able to experience play at a competitive level. I think it's an interesting choice to make it that you literally cannot play the game with the boosters alone. As I said, the boosters are not the game, the decks are the game, making the boosters like DLC? An optional expansion? And from what I've seen, the cards included in the boosters aren't significantly more powerful than the bombs exclusive to the trial decks anyway. I actually think the trial decks already contain the most powerful cards, meaning, as long as the cheaper trial decks remain the premier experience, and enough product is printed to keep the prices down, and going forward power-crept game pieces aren't made exclusive to the more expensive boosters, then I actually can't hate that the prices are higher for the optional extra packs. As long as that's what they remain, optional, I will remain in favour of this game. But I will keep my eye out for any power-crept pay-to-win nonsense. Time will tell here, and I will be watching. But for now, I'll give Pocket Pair the benefit of the doubt. Let's talk over my thoughts of the new player experience. And mostly my critiques. Because things could have been better. First off, the rules quick sheet included in the decks is simply not good enough. Now, in fairness, when we played, we didn't leave our assumptions at the door. So turn 1 we were like, wait, do pals have summoning sickness? The rules didn't specify you couldn't use them to attack the turn that you play them. Which is obviously nonsense. A game shouldn't need to print a rule for what doesn't happen, only what does. But also, give us a break. Maybe just include one line on that quick sheet that says pals can attack the turn that you play them. Because doing so, especially on turn 1, instinctively feels unfair. This was our first game, we didn't have any idea of the speed of gameplay or the overall power scale yet, so we had no idea that yes, you can play and be doing damage turn 1, before your opponent has had a chance to do anything yet. But don't worry, it's fine because the game is balanced around that exact type of gameplay. We just needed a bit more onboarding, and this quick sheet didn't cut it. Also, you gotta include basic rules like how player damage is calculated. It is not explained on the quick sheet, for instance, how much life you start at. I mean, we guessed 10, but we had to stop playing turn 1 to download the 16-page comprehensive rules document, and then spend 10 minutes reading through that to try and understand, and then we still got it wrong because we thought milling a lucky card stopped the mill and not the damage. Is some of this on us for being stupid? Sure, but we were brand new to the game, and I think there should be some kind of middle point between a basically useless rule sheet and a full-on 16-page document. Give new players more of a chance, cover all of the bases. Also, why is the card text so small? In fact, I'll make sure to show an example card on screen right now, because look at the rules text and look at all of the empty space beneath it. The font needs to be bigger. I don't need to wear glasses, but more than once I was like, wait, what symbol is that? Is that a 5 or a 6? Maybe an 8? I can't tell. The cards don't contain that much rules text. There's no need for it to be that small. And while we're talking design choices in the cards, why is the casting cost for structures on the top left of the card? That card is played landscape, so once it's on the table the casting cost will be top left like every other card. But once it's on the table the casting cost sort of doesn't matter. In your hand though, the card is going to be portrait, meaning you have two options. Have the casting cost top right in your hand, and probably covered over by the other cards that you're also holding, or turn the card upside down so that the casting cost is bottom left in your hand, but now the card back will be upside down and obvious to your opponent that you're holding a structure. Not a massive deal, but a weird choice that makes the gameplay a bit more frustrating in my opinion. That and the small text makes this feel more like a game designed to be played digitally, even though there is no official digital client, which is very odd. As for some positives, I really like that the game has a built-in card draw mechanic. Once per turn you can spend 3 souls to draw a card. Simple as that. That's a really clean way to prevent players stalling out due to lack of cards. Keeps the game going, very good, I wish more TCGs did this. I also really appreciated that even though some structures have an effect that only matters when they enter play, but are permanents, they then don't feel useless for sticking around on the table, as there are cards that care about how many structures you have, how many of each type, and what their names are, which all synergizes quite nicely. The game design feels really tight. I can see every card in this first release finding a home in at least one deck. There were very few cards that would feel like bulk chaff commons in any other game, so big fan of that. There's not a massive variety of cards in the game yet, but the ones that they do have feel really smartly designed. They've done exceptional work here. I also really appreciate the pace of the game. It felt snappy. I genuinely think that most games will probably take less time than watching this review does. I think most of our games only lasted about 10 to 12 turns, but also felt impactful. A lot of dramatic moments in every game. It's a lot of fun. I've got some quotes from some of my friends here on their thoughts as new players. Blue, who's not into Palworld, told me he felt, "The Palworld designs feel a bit generic, but no more generic than Pokemon from games I haven't played," which I think is fair enough, especially as he did like the art. Another friend compared his experience to Magic, saying, "Magic has gotten more complicated, especially the new sets. It's not as accessible as it used to be. Palworld by comparison seems easy enough to learn for beginners." And I'd agree with that too. I think we all found this snappy design and gameplay quite refreshing. And Green quietly told me, and I quote, "If Palworld leans into the bullshit nonsense, it would be worth playing over other TCGs." She was there to witness me getting hit with a kamikaze penguin for context. And then, because she's actually quite chatty once you get to know her, she messaged me the next day to say, "Here's my main problem with the game as it stands. It doesn't feel like you can be particularly creative with the builds. All the synergy seemed to be intentional on the developer's part. You mentioned flavor to me last night and I blew it off. I think that's just a me issue with the general Pokemon style of art and creative design. I just DGAF. However, I did like some of the flavor in the structure cards. In 5 years' time, I bet I'll be able to make a 0 creatures chairs only deck, and that's really fun." And since we've played all of them, even though a bit reluctant to initially play a Palworld TCG, have asked when we're playing again. And we've even begun to make time to play it digitally, so I think that's a good sign. I think the game might have legs. Speaking of the future, I hope that accessibility improves as more of these sets are printed, and we see reprints of the existing decks. I also hope that the game explores outwards in its design instead of up, meaning that the selling point for new packs is new and interesting cool mechanics that you want to play with, not busted and overpowered cards that you feel you have to play with. But mostly, I just want the game to stick around. I couldn't find any official sources on this, so don't quote it as fact from me, but from what I understand, Palworld owner Pocket Pair acquired a stake in Bushiroad, which is the company that prints the cards, back in 2025. Also, the next Palworld TCG set, entitled Legends Awaken, is due to be released on the 30th of October this year. So that's like 3 months away. If that keeps up, we'll get 4 sets a year. So given those 2 key pieces of information, I think it seems like Pocket Pair are taking this TCG business seriously, and have plans for it to become a thing. And quite frankly, I think they've handled this release well. It's only a couple of 100 cards, but they're tightly designed. The game is fun, so if they can continue to put out sets like this one, and it's manageable for them to do so, I think this could lead to a really healthy play environment for the game, as long as there's enough product to keep the scalpers at bay. And speaking of again, let's talk challenges. Scalpers, like I mentioned. The fact the game is sold out everywhere is also an issue. I suspect scalping is going to be a real problem, but honestly that's not one that's unique to this game, and I don't really know what they need to do about it outside of trying to print enough product. But what more can I say really? As for challenges a little bit more unique to Palworld, well, Palworld as a franchise does advertise itself by highlighting some of the more shocking elements of what the video game allows, like the guns or the fact that you can butcher your own pals. And those elements are both reflected in the TCG too, which I think will put some people off, but honestly, those aspects are not that bad, at least in my opinion. Butchering a pal is no worse than sacrificing a creature in Magic, for instance. Pokemon is a game about dogfighting, etc, etc. And equipping a creature with a gun is no worse than equipping it with a magic amulet that emulates people or whatever, so if someone's pearls are clutched at the idea of playing this game, then I think they should take a breath, unclutch, and actually give it a chance because it is fun. I remember when the Palworld video game first came out and I saw a bunch of reviews saying things like, "This is just an animal torture simulator." But like, I played the early access version of that for about 40 hours, and I had a thoroughly pleasant time, mostly just building nice housing for my cute animal friends. I didn't feel the need to punch a single sheep, so if that's all someone did during their time with it, then I feel that's more a reflection of them than the gameplay itself. It's like, sure, you can break your spouse's heart by cheating on them with their friends, but if that's all you're doing in Stardew Valley, then I think that's more of a you problem. I think in the game, it's interesting that once the deck is built, the colour system doesn't really seem to matter too much. Souls can be used to cast any colour of cards, so you don't need to worry about mana management in that way. But there doesn't appear to be any colours matter gameplay. Yes, purple cards have removal and red is more about dealing big damage, so maybe the colours already do enough at the deck construction stage to differentiate themselves by restricting the design space, but I do wonder what that's going to make the future of the game look like. Eventually, you need to sell new sets, and there's only so many ways to design around red does big damage, so it means that the likelihood of cards getting printed that break that colour divide is almost a certainty if the game goes on long enough, and at that point, why have the colour system at all? Unless the game leans into power creep and just prints more powerful versions of existing designs, which I think will cause issues in its own right, though I hope they don't do that, but also I'm not sure how much design space there is to explore here. I guess we're going to see in time, probably in that new set in a couple of months, and I'm really hoping to be proven wrong here. And let's finally address the Nintendo of it all, because I think this is an issue too. There was a lot of allegations about Palworld when the video game first came out, but if memory serves, most of those allegations were from people who later admitted to having faked their evidence that Palworld had ripped off Pokemon. A lot of people said Pocket Pair just fed Pokemon designs into an AI and got them to spit out knockoff copies for Palworld, and I'm not saying that didn't happen, but first of all, the initial trailer for Palworld I saw was in 2021. I'm not even sure generative AI was even capable of doing that sort of thing back then. Hell, I'm not even sure if generative AI can be used to make 3D models now, and those initial PAL designs are pretty polished in that early trailer. I don't know how long that game was already in production for, but Lamball doesn't look like she's changed at all, for instance, so I don't know. Nintendo is pretty litigious, and I think if there were literally any evidence that Palworld had ripped them off, then they would be in court over the designs. But they aren't. Nintendo tried to sue them on some jumped up patent law issues instead. If memory serves again, patents Nintendo applied for after the fact anyway, so again I say, I don't know. Seems like Nintendo is just reaching there. They don't own the concept of monster catching, and maybe Palworld did nothing wrong. But the fact I felt I needed to mention it at all, the fact that in the mind of your average person talking positively about Palworld comes across like you're picking a side in a fight, is just exhausting. And I suspect that's exactly what Nintendo wanted, because they don't want the competition. It seems to me they want to dominate the TCG market and pump out the same reheated, bug-filled, barely functional poker slop games every couple of years and have people eat it up without complaint because they have no other option. So I just wanted to enjoy a fun card game, and that's what Palworld is. But if Nintendo are going to warp the conversation around it for their own corporate monopolistic benefit, then I say, fair enough, let's have the conversation. If a line in the sand has to be drawn, I'm going to look at one side and see how they set a new standard of $80 price point video games with their release of Mario Kart, that most reviews seem underwhelmed with, by the way. I'm going to look at how that same side legally doesn't have to, but is going to choose to keep their illegal tariff refund and not pass any of that money back to the consumer, even though prices were hiked up due to the tariff, which I think is kinda shitty. And how that same company is so anti-consumer and lawfare crazed that they'll regularly shut down tournaments, DMCA live streams, sometimes promotional ones that they themselves requested, and will even send armed police to arrest a man in his 50s. Like, I know he did a lot of piracy, but he went to prison and you're still gonna make him pay you 20 to 30% of his income each month? For life? That's supervillain shit, Nintendo. He served his time, calm it down. Yeah, if my choices are what appear to be that quite frankly evil company or Palworld, then I'll take the one selling me a full and complete experience with a £15 trial deck any day of the week. So to close it out, as it stands right now, I think the Palworld TCG is great, for gameplay reasons and on its own merits. But also, if third parties are going to make choosing to play some sort of moral statement, then yeah, okay, I'll make that statement and say you should check out the game if you can. Do not pay markups, don't support scalping, and if you're comfortable with it, that website I mentioned at the start is there for you to try the game for free too, at least for now. If you do play though, I've called dibs on Daydream, that one's my one so you guys aren't allowed to play with it, or any future printings of it too. Sorry, but that's my favourite pal, so you know, dibs. Thank you very much for watching this video, and thank you to everyone that supports me, like 27 publications, Eggboy the Particle that permeates all existence, Blank Space, Wanpako Jozu, Miss Murder, a random Patreon, and the rest of my patrons whose names are on screen now. I'd also like to thank the sponsor for this video, me and my Patreon page, where you can get your name credited on screen too. Check it out in the link in the description below. Hit the like button, leave a comment, respect my Daydream dibs, and most importantly subscribe and share this video with a friend. Hit the notification bell and do all those things the algorithm loves. If you agree or disagree with any of my points, or you want to see me do a video on another subject, let me know, and I will see you next time.